if you would indulge me, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about each of the 17 stories. And I want it to be brief, I want it to be exciting, and I'm kind of torn between giving a synopsis, of what the story's about, which we all know, at least for me, that's the least important thing. The thing that makes a story is the moment for moment. Down in the trenches, line for line. I mean, for me, each sentence that I write is a knife fight with myself. So drafting, I mean, when I go in, if I don't get bloody, it's not worth it. And I almost feel like the plot, Oscar Wilde said, have a rich guy fall in love with his maid, you got a plot. I don't necessarily believe that there's only 5 plots. I've heard that somewhere. Whoever they are, they say. I think it's more complex than that, but I also don't know that that's the most important thing. So I'm going to give a little nutshell of each story, but I'm also going to talk about what inspired it, or maybe something in the background that's not so much noise, that's relevant, that maybe people can relate to. The first piece, I started out with what I would determine is my best short story, and not really because of my opinion, but it ended up in a best of. I was in the 2011 best of that Prime Books puts out in 2011. The story is called How Bria Died, and it was in my first collection. It opened my first collection, which S.T. Joshi shepherded through Hippocampus Press. And the collection was called 7 Deadly Pleasures. And originally it was called 5 Deadly Pleasures because there were 5 stories. There's one novella called Toll Booth that's 100 pages, and I'll talk about that later. But it was just 5. And S.T., he said to me, it's not going to come out for a year anyway, so why don't we make your little parallel work and make it 7 Deadly Pleasures. So I was working at a charter school in downtown Philadelphia at that time, and the room I was in, I taught 10th grade, and the room was on the side of the building. The building used to be an old warehouse, and it's right on Broad Street, Broad and Spring Garden in Philadelphia. And Broad Street, if you don't know Philly, that's one of the major arteries that goes from south to north. It even goes through City Hall. It's a major artery in Philadelphia. So I'm downtown. And if you go in the Buttonwood entrance, which is the side entrance, I was in an alcove of 4 rooms. And I was the closest one on the right. And from what I had heard, the year before I came in to teach, my first year, that room was just one big mess. There was like dangling wires and pipes and all these old invoices and all that, almost like a haunted room, and they kept a lock on it. So what I did was, and true to life, I made up a story about a girl named Bria Patterson who was killed up by the forbidden room the year before, and now she haunts the alcove. And I had a whole story that I built through years of teaching, trying to scare the shit out of my students, and boy, was that fun. I mean, I had a moment where there was a young woman named Leah, and you know how if you lean against a wall that's connected to the hallway and all the walls are thin, you can feel what's going on out there. I was at the climax of this story that I had been adding on to year after year. And I was at the scary part, man, and somebody bumped the wall on the other side, and Leah ran across the room screaming. And gosh, was that a fun moment. I love teaching high school, man, just for moments like that. So when I wrote it, it took only a week to write because I already written it. I had written it over years. And S.T. really thought it was worthwhile, and he gave it to Weird Tales, and they published it, and then it ended up in a best of. So what I did was, hey, I was telling a story verbally. I made a frame story about a guy telling that story and what happens to him, and that's how we got how Bria died, and that's what opens the collection.